The air in the brownstone hummed with the easy, expensive noise of a successful party. Laughter bubbled over the steady thrum of jazz from hidden speakers, and the warm glow of recessed lighting polished the gleaming hardwood floors. It was a housewarming, but it felt more like a gallery opening. Every guest a carefully curated piece of the host's new life. The host himself, a man named Robert, moved through the crowd like a seasoned captain on a prized ship. He was in his element, clapping shoulders, refilling glasses, his voice a confident baritone that cut through the chatter. He had worked for the sleek furniture, the abstract art on the walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city's glittering skyline, and his crowning achievement, the piece that pulled the whole room together, sat in a soft pool of light in the far corner, a baby grand piano, its lacquered ebony surface shining like a deep, still pool across the room. Near a tall shelf lined with unread, leather-bound books, stood a woman named Elena. She held a glass of mineral water, the condensation cool against her fingers. She watched the party like one might watch a play from the back row, engaged, but separate. She was there for her friend, Anya, who was married to Robert's business partner. Elena was comfortable in silence, her observant eyes missing little. She wore a simple, dark blue dress that spoke of quiet taste rather than loud fashion. In this room of booming voices and sharp anecdotes, she was a rest note. Robert's gaze swept the room, landing on her. Anya had mentioned once, in passing, that her friend Elena used to be involved with music. The detail had stuck in Robert's mind, not as a history to be respected, but as a potential feature for the evening. Like the artisan cheese board or the signature cocktail, he saw a quiet woman by the bookshelves, and he saw his beautiful, silent piano. The connection seemed not just logical, but generous. It would be a gift to his guests, and a nudge to her, he thought, to bring her out of her shell. He excused himself from a conversation and made his way over, his smile wide and welcoming. "Elena, hiding with the philosophers, are we?" he boomed, his voice causing a few nearby heads to turn. Elena offered a small, polite smile. "Just admiring your collection, Robert. You have a beautiful home. It's nothing without the people in it," he said, the practiced line rolling easily off his tongue. "Which reminds me, we need a little life, a little real music in here. That streaming service is all very well, but it's got no soul." He gestured grandly towards the piano. "Anya told me you're our musical secret weapon." A faint flicker of unease crossed Elena's eyes, so quick it was almost imperceptible. "Oh, that was a very long time ago, Robert. I don't really play anymore." "Nonsense." He chuckled, as if she'd made a modest joke. "It's like riding a bicycle. And look at that instrument. It's begging to be played. Just a little something, a party piece." He placed a firm, guiding hand on her elbow, not unkindly, but with an insistence that brooked no argument in his social world. "Really, I'm too out of practice." "You wouldn't want that," she said, her voice softer, a note of genuine plea in it. She allowed herself to be steered away from the safety of the bookshelf, her steps reluctant. 10 seconds, Robert announced to the room at large, raising his free hand. "Everyone, a bit of quiet for our talented guest. Elena is going to grace us with a tune." The party's noise dipped into a curious, expectant murmur. Dozens of friendly, wine-flushed faces turned towards them. Anya, across the room, looked momentarily surprised, then gave Elena an encouraging, thumbs-up gesture. Trapped in the spotlight of collective goodwill, Elena felt a familiar, cold sensation begin to pool in her stomach. The path to the piano seemed to elongate, the polished floor tilting slightly. Robert led her to the plush, velvet-covered bench. The piano loomed larger up close, a monolith of black gloss. The lid was propped open, revealing the intricate, parallel lines of the strings inside. Like the ribs of a giant, silent creature, the keys, 88 of them, stretched out in an intimidating expanse of off-white and jet black. They looked less like an invitation and more like a set of exposed, waiting teeth. "It's a beauty, a Steinway," Robert said reverently, running a hand along its edge as if it were a luxury car. He placed his own half-finished glass of red wine on the carefully polished surface, near the music rack, a casual act that made Elena wince internally. "There you go. The stage is yours. Don't be shy. Something lively." He stepped back, folding his arms, a proud impresario. The crowd's attention was a physical pressure. Elena could feel their eyes on her back, their suspended conversations hanging in the air. Her mouth was dry. She looked down at her hands, resting limply in her lap. They were ordinary hands, slender, with short, neat nails. There were no visible calluses, no marks of a working musician. They were the hands of someone who worked at a computer, who gardened on weekends, who carried grocery bags. A memory, sharp and unbidden, flashed. Different hands, younger, flying across a different keyboard in a blur of motion. The sound not of polite jazz but of something powerful and roaring. She pushed it away, the ghost of the sensation making her fingers twitch. She had to do something. The silence was stretching, becoming awkward. Robert's encouraging smile was starting to look fixed. She could play a scale, a simple chord, just to satisfy them and get this over with. It was just 10 seconds. 10 seconds of noise, and then she could return to the shadows. Slowly, she lifted her hands. They felt heavy, alien. The air around the piano seemed thicker, harder to breathe. She positioned her right hand over the keys, the standard beginner's position for a C major chord. Her left hand hovered uselessly to the side. Her mind was a blank sheet of music. All the tunes she'd ever known, the classical sonatas, the pop songs, the jazz standards had vanished, wiped clean by a wave of sheer, mind-numbing panic. Just play a chord, any chord. She took a shallow breath, held it, and lowered her fingers. But her hands, betraying her, did not land in the comfortable, open shape of a C major. Instead, her second and third fingers, driven by a muscle memory that bypassed her conscious thought entirely, came down with a stiff, jarring force onto adjacent white keys, a B and the C right next to it. The sound that exploded in the elegant room was not music. It was a dissonant, clanging crash, a minor second, the most tense and unresolved interval in all of music. It was the sound of alarm bells, of grinding metal, of sheer, wrong notes. It was harsh, ugly, and it cut through the expectant quiet like a physical blow. The sound hung in the air, vibrating with a terrible finality. Robert's confident grin vanished, replaced by a confused frown. Someone in the crowd let out a short, startled laugh, then quickly stifled it. Most just looked bewildered, waiting for the joke or the real music to start. But for Elena, the world had just dissolved. The ugly chord didn't fade. It seemed to grow, to warp, pulling the room's light and sound into a vortex around it. The polite, curious faces of the strangers blurred. The gleaming black surface of the piano in front of her didn't reflect the room's lights anymore. It seemed to grow darker, absorbing the light, becoming the color of soot. The polished wood grain swam and twisted. The clean, modern scent of the room of lemon wood polish and perfume vanished. It was replaced, with shocking vividness, by a different smell. Acrid, chemical, thick. The smell of burning varnish, of melting wire insulation, of smoke. The gentle jazz from the speakers was gone. In its place, echoing inside her skull, was a rising, chaotic roar. The roar of flames, yes, but also the roar of a terrified crowd, a cacophony of screams. And beneath it all, the deep, discordant groan of a great structure under stress. She was no longer on a velvet bench. She was on a hard, polished stool. The city skyline outside the window was gone, replaced by the red velvet drape of a concert hall stage wing. The warmth of the room turned into a dry, searing heat that pressed against her face. Her hands were still on the keys, but they were younger hands, strong and sure, flying not in panic, but in furious, focused passion across a much larger keyboard. The notes not a single jarring chord, but a torrent of complex, Russian melody. And in the corner of her eye, a figure, a tall, stern-faced man with kind eyes, standing just off stage, nodding to her, his expression fierce with concentration. His lips were moving, but the only word she could hear, over the growing roar, was play. A violent tremor racked her body, starting deep in her core and shuddering out to her limbs. The glass of water she'd been holding earlier, now forgotten on the floor by the bench, seemed miles away. Her breath hitched, coming in short, useless gasps that couldn't reach her lungs. The beautiful, terrible room began to spin, the faces of the guests stretching into grotesque, worried masks. She tried to pull her hands from the keys, but they were locked, stuck to the ivory as if fused. All she could see was the dark, swirling grain of the piano, falling away into an endless, smoky blackness. All she could hear was the ghost of that single, awful chord, twisting into a scream that was both outside and inside her. Robert took a step forward, his annoyance melting into genuine concern. "Elena," he said, his voice now uncertain, cutting through the muffled roar in her ears. "Hey, are you?" But she couldn't hear him. The past had reached up through the piano and grabbed her, and 10 seconds after sitting down, everything, for Elena, had already gone terribly, completely wrong. The ugly sound of the chord seemed to hang in the air. Long after Elena's fingers had lifted from the keys, It wasn't a musical note that faded. It was more like a crack in the atmosphere of the party, letting something cold and wrong seep in. For everyone else, the silence that followed was just a few seconds of awkward confusion. For Elena, it was a vacuum, pulling her out of the present. She stared at the keyboard. The black and white keys weren't neat rows anymore. They shimmered and swam, the patterns twisting like wood grain in a fire. The polished black surface of the piano beside her didn't reflect the room's soft lights. It looked deep and dark, like a hole or like charred wood. A wave of heat washed over her, so real and sudden it made her flinch. It wasn't the warm, comfortable heat of a room full of people. This was dry, aggressive, carrying a smell that punched her in the gut. It was the sharp, chemical smell of melting plastic and varnish, layered with the deeper, more terrifying scent of real smoke, not from a fireplace, the jazz music, from the speakers, the chatter of the party, the clink of glasses. It all drained away as if someone had pulled a plug. In its place, a new sound rushed in, filling her ears, her head. It started as a low, ominous roar, like a distant train. Then came the sharper sounds, a cacophony of screams, not of party fun, but of pure terror, high-pitched and jagged. Underneath it all was a deep, shuddering groan, the sound of a big building in stress, of wood straining and giving way. Her body went rigid on the bench. She wasn't in the brownstone anymore. The plush velvet under her was gone, replaced by the hard, familiar feel of a piano stool on a concert stage. The city lights outside the window vanished. In the dark space, beyond the piano's curve, she saw the heavy, red velvet fabric of a stage curtain, lit by the hot, white glow of a spotlight that was no longer there. And she saw him, just off to the side, in the wing of that ghost stage, stood her teacher. He was tall, his posture perfectly straight even now. His hair was more gray than she remembered, his face a landscape of serious lines, but his eyes, fixed on her, were alive, intense, burning with a familiar command. He was nodding at her, a sharp, deliberate movement. His lips were moving, shaping a single, silent word against the growing roar of the memory. Play. Her own hands, on the keys of Robert's piano, were younger, strong, flexible, the hands of a 20-year-old prodigy, dancing not in panic but in a fierce, controlled storm across a much larger keyboard. She wasn't playing a clumsy chord. She was in the furious, final movement of a concerto. The notes a torrent of passion and technical fire, a physical battle with the music. The sound in her head wasn't the party's silence. It was the full, glorious, and now terrifying, roar of a symphony orchestra behind her, and the 1,000-strong audience in front, all of it merging with the new, horrible symphony of disaster. Back in the brownstone, Robert's concerned "Hey, are you?" finally reached her, but it sounded thin and far away, like someone shouting from the end of a long tunnel. Elena tried to pull her hands back from the keys, to break the connection, but her fingers wouldn't obey. They were frozen, locked to the ivory as if they'd grown roots into it. A violent tremor started deep inside her chest, a quake that rattled her bones and shook her shoulders. Her breathing, which had stopped entirely, suddenly came back in short, ragged gasps. She was sucking air in, but none of it seemed to reach her lungs. It was like breathing through a wet cloth. Her vision began to narrow, the edges turning dark and blurry. The worried faces of the guests round her stretched and melted into strange shapes. The room started to tilt, slowly at first, then faster, spinning around the fixed, dark point of the piano. "Oh, okay, easy now." Robert's voice was closer. He took another step, his hand outstretched but not touching her, unsure what was happening. The party's murmur had died completely. All pretense of conversation was gone. People stared, glasses frozen halfway to their lips. Some looked embarrassed, as if they were witnessing a private moment they shouldn't see. Others just looked shocked. Anya, Elena's friend, pushed her way through the crowd, her face pale with alarm. "Elena, honey, what's wrong?" She knelt beside the bench, putting a hand on Elena's trembling arm. The touch, meant to be comforting, felt like a brand. Elena jerked her arm away with a force that surprised even herself. "Don't." The word came out as a choked gasp, more of a plea than a command. She had to get away from the piano. That was the only thought her panicking brain could form. Get away from the keys. Get away from the smell. Get away from the memory of him. Using every ounce of will, she forced her numb legs to move. She pushed herself up from the bench, her movements stiff and uncoordinated. But as she stood, the dizziness overwhelmed her. The spinning room lurched. The phantom roar in her ears reached a crescendo, a crashing, Splintering sound mixed with a final, unified scream from the audience. In her mind's eye, she saw a section of the ornate ceiling, lit orange from below, give way. She saw the tall figure in the wing look up, his face illuminated not by stage light, but by a different, hellish glow. Her knees buckled. She didn't fall to the floor. Instead, she stumbled sideways, catching herself heavily against the cool, smooth wall. She pressed her forehead and palms against it, as if trying to push herself into the solid plaster. To anchor herself in the present, she squeezed her eyes shut, but that was worse. The darkness behind her eyelids was full of fire and movement. Give her some space, everyone. Come on, back up. Robert was trying to regain control of his party, his voice firm but tinged with worry. He herded the gawking guests back a few steps, creating a little bubble of awkward space round Elena and Anya near the wall. Anya stayed close but didn't touch her again. Elena, just breathe with me, okay? In and out. Slow, she demonstrated, taking exaggerated, slow breaths. Elena tried to match it. The air still smelled of smoke to her, but underneath it, she began to sense the real sense of the room again. The lemon cleaner, the remnants of roasted food, Anya's floral perfume. The roar in her ears began to recede, replaced by the muffled, concerned whispers of the party guests. The heat faded, leaving her skin clammy and cold. The tremor in her hands lessened from a quake to a fine, constant shake. She slowly opened her eyes. She was looking at beige wall paint, a simple, modern sconce. Real things, present things. But the feeling in her chest was a solid, cold weight. It was the grief, the old, familiar companion she had locked away decades ago. It had been cracked, opened by that one, stupid, discordant chord, and it had flooded out, drowning her in front of all these strangers. She became aware of herself again. The taste of shame was bitter in her mouth. She had made a scene. She had shattered the easy elegance of the evening. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back, full of pity, curiosity, and probably annoyance. I'm so sorry, she whispered, the words scraping her raw throat. She didn't turn around. She couldn't face them. Don't be sorry, Anya said softly, her voice close. Are you okay? Do you need water? Should I call someone? Elena shook her head, her forehead still against the cool wall. No doctors. I need to go home. Robert approached cautiously. Elena, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I just thought. He trailed off, genuinely contrite. His proud piano was now the source of the party's worst moment. It's not your fault, Elena managed to say, finally pushing herself upright and turning around. She avoided looking directly at anyone, her gaze fixed on a point on the floor. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and wide. It was me. I'm not well, a sudden dizziness. I should go. Anya wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders. This time Elena didn't pull away. She leaned into the support, feeling frail and ancient. I'll take you, Anya said firmly, shooting a look at her husband and Robert that brooked no argument. As Anya guided her through the silent, parted crowd towards the door, Elena kept her eyes down, but she couldn't help one last glance towards the corner. The piano sat there, beautiful and silent in its pool of light. It looked innocent again, but she knew the truth now, felt it in the hollow ache of her chest and the tremor still in her hands. The instrument wasn't just wood and wire. For her, it was a door, and for 10 seconds, a door she had kept locked for 25 years had been wrenched open, and everything she had buried inside had come screaming out. The amusement was over. The real story, the painful one, had just begun. The ride home was quiet. Anya drove, glancing over every so often at her friend in the passenger seat. Elena sat perfectly still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring out at the blur of city lights. She looked like someone who had just been in a car accident, shocked, distant, physically unhurt but deeply shaken. When they got to Elena's apartment, a small, neat space filled with books and plants, Anya didn't ask if she should come in. She just did, putting the kettle on for tea with the familiarity of a lifelong friend. The normal, domestic sounds, the click of the stove, the clink of mugs were a relief after the surreal horror of the party. Elena sat on her sofa, wrapping a whereupon throw round her shoulders. Even though she wasn't cold, she felt exposed, as if her skin were too thin. The ghost sensation of the piano keys was still on her fingertips. Anya brought the tea and sat beside her, not too close. She waited. She knew her friend, knew that pushing would seal the truth away forever, for a long time. Elena just watched the steam curl from her mug. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, full of the unspoken thing that had just happened. Finally, Elena spoke. her voice hollow and rough. It was the smell, she said, almost to herself. When I touched the keys, I smelled smoke. Real smoke. Anya nodded slowly, staying quiet. I haven't touched a piano in 25 years, Elena said. The number hung in the air. A lifetime. Not once. Not even to dust it. What happened 25 years ago? Anya asked, her voice soft. Elena took a shaky breath. It wasn't a story she told. It was a place she never visited. But the door was open now, and the memories were pouring out. She had to let them, or they would drown her where she sat. I was a pianist, she began, and the word felt foreign on her tongue. A real one. Not a hobby. It was who I was. From the time I was 6. It was all I did, all I thought about. She described a different version of herself, a young woman made of music. All sharp angles and intense focus. Her world was practice rooms, metronomes, and the pursuit of a perfect, fleeting sound. And at the center of that world was her teacher. He wasn't a warm man, Elena said, a faint, painful smile touching her lips. Not with hugs and praise. He was stern. He could silence you with a look. If you played a phrase without feeling, he'd slam the piano lid shut and say, "Why should I listen if you do not care to speak?" But his strictness, she explained, was a form of respect. He believed music was the most important conversation a person could have, and it demanded absolute honesty. He had been a formidable concert pianist in his youth, but he found his true calling in teaching. He saw something in her, a raw, powerful connection to the music, and he devoted himself to shaping it. He was my mentor, my guide. He was the closest thing I had to a musical father. I called him Maestro. Everyone did. But when he said my name, it felt like an award. She told Anya about the piece. The Rachmaninoff Third Piano Concerto. Classical musicians have a shorthand for it, Rach 3. It's not just a piece of music. It's a mountain. One of the most difficult ever written for the piano. A colossal, emotional, physically draining marathon. Mastering it is a rite of passage. It was to be my graduation, Elena said, her eyes distant. From student to artist. He had secured a spot for me to play it with a good regional orchestra. It was the biggest moment of my life. We had worked on it for over a year. Every note, every breath. He knew that piece better than anyone alive, I think. She described the final rehearsals. The electric mix of terror and excitement. The way the maestro would stand just off stage during her run-throughs, his eyes closed, listening not just to the notes but to the intention behind them. Then, she came to the night. The hall was sold out. Friends, family, strangers. I was dressed in this ridiculous, sparkly gown that made me feel like an imposter. I was so nervous I thought I might be sick. But then I walked out, sat down at that huge concert grand, and I saw him, standing right there in the wing, in his tuxedo. He gave me a single, sharp nod. Not a smile, a nod. It meant, "You are ready. Now speak." The first 2 movements, she said, were a blur of focused energy. She played well. The orchestra was with her. She could feel the audience leaning in. Then came the final movement. It's like being caught in a storm, she whispered. The music is furious, powerful. You're using your whole body, every ounce of strength and emotion you have. Your hands are pounding, flying. The orchestra is this roaring beast behind you. It's loud. So loud, her hands, resting on her knees, began to mimic a faint, trembling motion. I was deep in it. In that place where you're not really thinking anymore. You're just channeling, and then I saw it. Her voice dropped, becoming flat, detached, as if narrating a film she was forced to watch. A wisp of gray smoke, curling from the back of the stage, behind the orchestra. I thought it was a stage fog machine. A mistake. I kept playing. A few of the violinists in the front row noticed. I saw them look over, their bows faltering for a second. Then there was more smoke, thicker, darker. She described the first sign of panic, a cellist coughing. A ripple of movement in the brass section. The conductor, his back to it, was still leading fiercely. But the musicians' eyes were darting. The roar of the music was now competing with a new, lower roar. I looked to the wing, to him, the maestro. He had seen it. Of course he had. His face was like stone, but his eyes were wide, fixed on the growing plume of smoke. Then, those eyes snapped to her, and he did the one thing she never expected. He nodded again, the same sharp, commanding nod as before, but this time, his face was a mask of fierce, desperate urgency. His lips formed the word clearly, slicing through the growing chaos. Play. He wanted me to keep going, Elena said, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. To not break, To not let the music die. It was the rule. The absolute rule. The show must you don't stop. So she played. As the smoke thickened, drifting across the stage lights, turning them hazy and orange. As the first scream came from the audience, a short, sharp sound of alarm, she played through the coughs of the musicians, through the conductor's frantic glance over his shoulder. Her fingers, acting on a deep, trained instinct, kept hammering out the furious, beautiful storm of Rachmaninoff. It was surreal. The music was so loud, so all-consuming, but underneath it was this other soundtrack. People starting to shout, chairs scraping, the groan of the old building. I could smell it then. The electrical fire, the burning, the chaos was building, but the orchestra, professionals to their core, was still playing, following the conductor who was now trying to speed through to the end. The maestro never moved from his spot. He stood there, a tall, unwavering pillar in the swirling smoke, his gaze locked on her, pouring every bit of his will into that single command. Asterisk play. Asterisk. We were getting to the final pages. The biggest, most crashing chords. The whole hall was supposed to shake with sound, and it did, but not just with music. There was a crack, a loud, splintering sound from above. I looked up. Part of the ornate ceiling decoration, ancient and dry, had caught. A section of it was glowing, orange embers raining down onto the back of the stage. Flames, real flames, lit up a heavy velvet curtain. Pandemonium broke. The orchestra finally stopped, instruments screeching to a halt. The conductor yelled, "Evacuate! Get out!" Musicians scrambled from their chairs, knocking over stands. The audience was a roaring tide of movement, pushing towards the exits. I froze, Elena whispered. My hands just stopped, stuck on the keys. I couldn't move. I looked at the maestro. The firelight was on his face. He was no longer nodding. He was looking at the burning ceiling, then at the panicked stampede, then back at her, trapped at the giant piano in the center of the collapsing world. And then he moved. He ran. Not away. He ran towards me, towards the center of the stage. A huge, burning piece of wood and plaster broke free from the ceiling with a terrifying groan. It swung down, trailing fire, heading right for the spot where she sat, paralyzed. He didn't shout. He just tackled me, wrapped his arms around me, and threw us both off the stool, onto the hard stage floor. The crash was immense. The burning beam smashed onto the piano bench, obliterating it, and crashed into the keyboard with a catastrophic, dissonant roar of broken wood and snapping strings. A shower of sparks and debris erupted over them. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. She felt his weight on her, then felt him roll, shielding her with his body from the falling embers. His tuxedo jacket smelled of wool and, now, of smoke. He pulled me up, she said, her voice breaking. He was saying, "Go. Go, now." He shoved me towards the opposite wing, towards the clear air. I stumbled, looked back. The maestro was turning, looking for another way off the burning stage. At that moment, a second, larger section of the proscenium arch, weakened and burning, gave way. It fell in a cascade of timber and flame, cutting off the wing he was heading for, and crashing down between him and her. The last thing I saw was him, turning towards the wall of fire. And then he was just gone. Elena went silent. The apartment was so quiet they could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I was pulled out by a stagehand. The fire department came. It was all news vans and ambulances and crying people. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. They found him later, in the rubble near the stage. She looked at Anya, her eyes full of a grief that the story was out. Sitting in her quiet living room, the words hanging in the air between them, Elena felt a strange, hollow relief. It was like lancing a wound that had festered for decades. It hurt terribly, but the terrible pressure was finally gone. Anya didn't try to hug her or offer empty comforts. She just listened, her own eyes bright with tears. When Elena finished, she simply reached over and squeezed her friend's hand, a solid, warm anchor in the storm of memory. "You never told anyone?" Anya asked softly. Elena shook her head. "When I got out of the hospital just for smoke inhalation, a few scratches, I just left. I quit the conservatory, changed my phone number, moved across the country. I didn't go to the funeral." She said the last part quietly, the old shame burning fresh. "I couldn't. Everyone would have seen me as the reason he was in there, the student he had to save." "That's not true," Anya said, but her voice held no force. She knew logic didn't touch a wound like that. "It's what I felt," Elena said. "It's what I've always felt. If I hadn't been playing that impossible piece on that stage, if he hadn't been so devoted to me finishing it. She trailed off, so I buried it. The piano, the music, him. I built a new life where none of that existed. I went into book editing. Safe, quiet work with words that were already written. No performance, no audience, just me and a manuscript. She gestured around her apartment. It was a testament to that quiet life. Plants, comfortable furniture, shelves overflowing with novels and biographies. There was no music stand, no sheet music, not even a decorative metronome. It was the home of someone who had carefully, surgically removed a core part of themselves. For years, it worked, Elena continued. The memory was like a book on a high shelf. I knew it was there, but I didn't have to take it down. Then, tonight, she looked at her hands, still faintly trembling. Robert's piano. It was so like the one on that stage. The same glossy black, the same feel of the keys under my fingers. It wasn't just a memory that came back. It was a time machine. I wasn't remembering it. I was asterisk their asterisk. The two women sat in silence for a while, drinking their now cold tea. The shock of the party was settling into a deep, weary sadness. What he did, your teacher. It was an act of love, Elena, Anya ventured carefully. A terrible, tragic one, but love, not guilt. Elena nodded, a tear dropping onto the whereupon throw. I know that here, she said, tapping her temple, but I never let myself feel it. All I let myself feel was the loss, and the debt. A debt so big I could never repay it, so I just walked away from the currency. I stopped dealing in music altogether. The doorbell rang, making them both jump. Anya got up to answer it. It was Robert. He stood on the doorstep looking utterly unlike the confident host from earlier. His shoulders were slumped, his face was pale with worry, and he held a small pastry box awkwardly in his hands. I'm so sorry to intrude, he said, his voice subdued. I had to come. I couldn't leave things like that. Anya let him in. Robert saw Elena on the sofa, wrapped in her blanket, looking small and drained. He seemed to shrink a little more. Elena, I am so sorry, he said, the words tumbling out. That was unforgivable. My big mouth, my need to be the fun host. I am such an idiot. I had no idea. I would never have. I just thought it was a bit of fun. He placed the pastry box on the coffee table as if it were a peace offering. How are you feeling? A little better, Elena said, and she found she wasn't angry with him. His thoughtlessness had been a blunt instrument, but it wasn't malicious. It wasn't your fault, Robert. You didn't know. But that's just it, he said, sitting carefully on the edge of an armchair. We never know, do we? What people are carrying. I was showing off my fancy toy, and for you, it was a landmine. He ran a hand through his hair. Anya told me a little in the car, after she got back to the party. Just the bare bones. About the fire. About your teacher. My God, Elena, I'm so sorry. Hearing him say it, this near stranger, made it feel more real, and also somehow lighter. The secret wasn't just hers and Enya's anymore. It was out in the world, and the world hadn't ended. Robert stayed for a little while, his usual bluster completely gone, replaced by a sincere, clumsy empathy. Before he left, he hesitated at the door. Listen, I don't know if this means anything, and please, say no if it's the wrong thing, but I have a colleague, his daughter. She's 12, and she's been playing piano since she was 5. She's good, really talented, but she's stuck. She says she hates it now. She wants to quit. Her teacher is very technical, very strict. She's lost the joy. He looked at Elena, his expression earnest. I was thinking, not to play. God, no, I would never ask that. But maybe, to talk to her. You have a story, a real one, about what music can mean, about the cost of it, but also, I don't know, maybe about why it mattered so much to someone. Once, Elena felt the immediate, visceral no rise in her throat. To talk about music, to be near a student, it felt like stepping back towards the edge of the cliff she'd fallen off. Robert saw her hesitation. Just think about it. No pressure. I'll give your friend my number if you change your mind. Or don't. I just wanted to offer something. An apology that isn't just words. After he left, the apartment felt quiet again, but different. The aftermath of a crisis. For the next week, Elena moved through her life in a daze. She went to work, edited her manuscripts, watered her plants, but everything felt thin, like a painted backdrop. The real world was the internal one, now stirred up and muddy. She dreamed of smoke and nodding shadows. She'd be chopping vegetables and suddenly her hands would remember the weight of a chord, and a chill would go through her. The girl, the 12-year-old who wanted to quit, the thought kept circling back. At first, it felt intrusive, then irritating, then persistent. She saw herself at 12, a girl made of piano keys and dreams, who lived for her lessons. She remembered the pure, uncomplicated joy of making a beautiful sound, of finally getting a difficult passage right. That joy came before the pressure, before the concerts, before the tragedy. She thought of the maestro, not at the end, but in the middle, in the dusty sunlight of his studio. He wasn't just teaching her notes, he was telling her stories. He'd say, this phrase, here, it is not sad, it is asterisk remembering asterisk happiness. Play it like a ghost of a smile. Or, these chords are not angry, they are a door slamming. Let the sound shock us. He wasn't just building a technician, he was building a storyteller. One evening, she found herself standing in front of her tallest bookcase. On the very top shelf, pushed to the back, was a cardboard box she hadn't opened in 25 years. She had to get a step stool to reach it. Dust flew as she brought it down. Her heart was pounding. She sat on the floor and lifted the flaps. Inside were relics of another life. Program brochures, yellowed with age, a pressed corsage from some long ago recital, and at the bottom, a stack of sheet music. On top was the titanic, dense score of Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto, her own copy, marked in her young handwriting, and in his distinctive, sharp pencil strokes. His notations were everywhere, a circle around a dynamic marking, a single word like breathe, or storm. In the margin, she didn't play it. She couldn't, but she traced her finger over his handwriting. It didn't bring back the fire. It brought back him his voice, his impossible standards, his belief that she had something worth saying. The debt. That's what she had called it. A debt she could never repay. But sitting there on the floor, a new thought, fragile and quiet, emerged. What if it wasn't a debt to be repaid, but a gift to be passed on? The maestro had given her the gift of music, of understanding. He had, in the most final way, given her the gift of her life. And what had she done with it? She had hidden it away, like a precious, broken vase. Robert's request wasn't about playing. It was about talking. About the why, not the how. The girl who wanted to quit didn't need another technician. She needed someone to remind her of the story, the joy, the conversation. A few days later, Elena asked Anya for Robert's number. She sent him a simple text message, I'll meet the girl. Just to talk. No promises, The reply came quickly. Thank you. Just thank you, Elena put her phone down. She felt terrified. She felt nauseous. But for the first time in 25 years, she also felt a faint, unfamiliar flicker. It wasn't joy. It was purpose. She wasn't going back to the piano, but she was, perhaps, finally going to turn and face the music. The music school was in a converted old house on a quiet, tree-lined street. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto scuffed wooden floors. The air smelled of dust, old paper, and, faintly, of lemon polish, a smell that was comforting, not triggering. Elena stood in the small lobby, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs. She clutched her old, battered Rachmaninoff score to her chest like a shield. Robert's colleague, a kind-eyed man who had shaken her hand with a gratitude that felt too heavy, had ushered her into a practice room. She's in there, just. Thank you for coming. Then he left, giving them space. Elena took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room was small, dominated by an upright piano. A girl, all long limbs and a messy ponytail, sat slouched on the bench, staring at a piece of sheet music with open resentment. She looked up as Elena entered. Her eyes were wary, guarded. She'd been told some lady who used to play was coming to talk, probably another adult to tell her to practice more. Hi, Elena said, her voice sounding thin in the small room. I'm Elena, you must be. She realized she didn't even know the girl's name. Lily, the girl said. It wasn't hostile, just flat. It's nice to meet you, Lily. Your dad said you've been playing for a while. Lily shrugged, a universal gesture of teenage indifference. 7 years. It's boring now. Elena pulled up a plain wooden chair and sat, not too close. She placed the thick score on her lap. I get that. It can feel like that. All scales and corrections. Lily glanced at the score. Her curiosity piqued despite herself by its dense, intimidating look. What's that? This, Elena said, running a hand over the cover, is a piece I used to work on. A long time ago. It's called Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto. Is it hard? A small, pained smile touched Elena's lips. It's considered one of the hardest pieces ever written. It's like climbing a mountain with your hands. Lily's eyes widened slightly. Respect for the mountain, if not for the activity. Why did you stop playing? Lily asked, the question direct and unflinching. Elena had prepared for this, but the words still stuck in her throat. She wouldn't tell the girl about the fire. That was too much, not her burden to bear. But she could tell her about the heart of it. I had a teacher, Elena began slowly. My maestro, he was the most important person in my musical life. He believed music wasn't about hitting the right notes. It was about telling a story, about having a conversation without words. Lily was listening now, her chin resting in her hand. He had these ways of explaining things, Elena continued, feeling the memory rise, clean and clear this time. If you were playing a run of fast notes too mechanically, he'd say, you are typing a letter. I want you to asterisk whisper a secret asterisk. Or if a chord needed to be powerful, he'd say, do not hit it, asterisk unveil asterisk it. She saw a flicker of interest in Lily's eyes. It was more interesting than play louder or watch your fingering. What happened to him? Lily asked. Elena chose her words with care. There was an accident, a very bad one, and he didn't make it. After that, the music felt tied to that sadness for me, so I put it away for a very long time. Oh, Lily said softly. The guarded look softened into something like sympathy. That's really sad. It is, Elena agreed. But you know, being here, talking to you, it makes me remember the parts before the sad part, the good parts. Like how he would get so excited about a single, beautiful phrase. She opened the score to a random page, covered in those sharp pencil marks. See here, this is his handwriting. Lily leaned over to look. What does it say? Right here, Elena pointed. Next to these gentle, falling notes, he wrote a sigh, not piano or legato, just a sigh. She turned to another page, to a furious, stormy section. And here, next to these crashing chords, he wrote the door slams. He heard the story in the notes. Lily was captivated now, tracing the strange notations with her eyes. My teacher just writes forte or staccato. Those are important too, Elena said. They're the grammar. But the story, that's the magic. That's what makes people lean in and listen. Why did you start playing, Lily? Before the scales got boring? Lily thought for a moment. There was this song in a movie. It was really pretty. I wanted to make that sound. That's it, Elena said, her voice warm. That wanting to make a beautiful sound. That's the seed. My maestro would say that's the only thing that matters. The technique. The hours of practice. That's just how you learn to tell the story better. To make the sound match the feeling in your head. She looked at the piano. The fear was there, a cold knot in her stomach. But it was quieter now, overlaid with this new purpose. Do you have a piece you're working on? One you sort of like? Elena asked. Lily made a face. It's this etude. It's all about arpeggios. It's for an exam. Can I hear it? With a sigh that was pure teenager, Lily turned to the piano, ranged her music, and began to play. It was technically decent, careful, and completely lifeless. Her fingers moved correctly, but the music was just notes, one after the other. When she finished, she looked at Elena, expecting the usual critique. Elena was quiet for a moment. You know, an arpeggio is just a broken chord. It's the notes of a harmony, spread out like a fan. She stood up, her legs feeling weak, and took a step towards the piano. The old panic whispered, but she pushed it down. She wasn't going to play. She pointed at the sheet music. This section here. Instead of thinking up and down the keys, what if you thought of it as unwrapping a gift? Each note is another layer of the paper coming off. There's anticipation, a little sparkle. Lily looked at the notes, then back at Elena, skepticism warring with intrigue. Try it, Elena said softly. Just that line, not for the exam, just to see what it feels like to unwrap something. Hesitantly, Lily placed her hands on the keys. She played the arpeggio again. This time, it was marginally less mechanical. There was a tiny swell in the middle, a hint of shape. Yes, Elena whispered, a genuine smile breaking through. Like that, you see. That's the beginning of a story. Encouraged, Lily tried it again. And again. Each time, the line became less of an exercise and more of a musical phrase. It wasn't perfect, but it was asterisk alive asterisk. It sounds better, Lily admitted, a touch of wonder in her voice. It sounds like asterisk you asterisk, Elena said. They talked for a while longer. Elena told more stories about the maestro, his terrible coffee, his love for terrible puns about composers, the way he could hear a single wrong note in a complex chord from across the room. Lily laughed at the puns. The room, which had felt so tense, grew warm and light. When it was time to go, Lily's father was waiting in the lobby. The girl bounded over to him. Her energy changed. "Dad, can I work on the middle section of the etude again? I want to try something." As her father agreed, surprised, Lily turned back to Elena. "Thank you," she said, and it was sincere. "Will you come back?" Elena felt a lump in her throat. "I'd like that." She walked out into the afternoon sun. The old score held loosely now, not clutched. She felt drained, but it was the good drain of hard, meaningful work. She had stood next to a piano. She had talked about music, and the world hadn't ended. The smell of smoke had stayed in the past, where it belonged. That evening, back in her apartment, she didn't put the score back in the box. She left it on her coffee table. It was no longer a relic of a tragedy. It was a testament to a great teacher. A few days later, on her way home from work, she passed a small music store. In the window was a simple, elegant metronome. On impulse, she went inside and bought it. At home, she placed it on a shelf, not near the piano score, but among her books. A quiet, steady reminder of time, of rhythm she didn't play. She knew she might never truly play again, and that was okay. The act of performance, of sitting on that bench in the spotlight, might always be tied to that night, but something else had happened. She had passed on a fragment of the gift. She had helped a girl find the story in the notes. In doing so, she had finally separated the maestro's life from his death. She remembered the teacher, not just the hero. The music, not just the fire. She walked to her window, looking out at the city lights beginning to sparkle in the dusk. For 25 years, her story had been frozen on a single, terrible chord. Now, she felt the possibility of a new phrase, one she wouldn't play with her fingers, but might build with her words, her attention, her quiet understanding. It was a different kind of music, softer, no less important. It was not an ending, but a gentle, resolved cadence, a sigh of release, and the beginning of a quieter, truer song.